Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to this review of Doctor Who, The Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, or just The Massacre. Now this story, I have to say, was a surprising good rewatch. I mean, the first time I saw this reconstruction, it wasn't so great. It was okay, but the story wasn't that great. I wasn't really that fond of the story, but on rewatching this story, it's been fun, it's been really good. Can't say it's amazing, but it's still really good. The character, it's mostly seeing Stephen as the main character, to be honest, for the most parts. It's him going around discovering plots and secrets whilst trying to wait for the Doctor, and when he thinks the Abbot is the Doctor, he tries to go and see him, mistakenly thinking that it is the Doctor, but eventually in part 4 he finds the Doctor again. And it's actually really interesting seeing Stephen going around seeing all these events, and even being part of them inexplicably, unexpected, and unintentionally being involved in the events and meeting new friends like Nicholas, Gaston, although he does kind of think he is a traitor about halfway through, as traitor/spy, and Anne, a runaway servant girl, when she hears about plots for the massacre. It does have a slight slow start throughout episode 1, but it's not terribly jarring after the 12-part epic, The Dalek Master Plan, which was perfectly paced for the most parts, and had better build-up than most shorter stories had with its first parts. This one actually felt okay in comparison. Most of the other early stories of the classic series, and even some new stories, they might take a while to build up the start of the story. It's very common with 6-part stories, and even a couple of 4-part stories in the classic series, and longer ones, of course. Master Plan being the current exception, but we'll see when we get to Invasion and War Games and the other 7-parters. But certainly, it's one of the better. Massacre has one of the better build-ups to the story than some of the previous couple. There've been quite a few good ones, but they either take too long to build up, too slow, or they will do something else to pass the time. Master Plan is Eve and Massacre do come under, it is a bit of a slow build, but a bit more enjoyable, and it's not jarring to have this slow build. The next story, The Ark, is kind of like a two-parters in one kind of thing, so they won't spend too much time setting up either, I don't think. And then Celestial Toymaker is a bit more like, they've got this kind of a fun setup, and then there's stuff going on every episode to keep the viewer engaged. I think the next one that's going to have a slightly slow, or quite a slow start that takes a while to get started before it does more interesting stuff, will be The Gunfighters. I think that's going to be the next one, where it takes its time to actually start setting up anything. We'll see how that goes. I think The Ark might do it, but it's a bit differently structured than most of the 4-parters. Similar to The Chase, in a way, is a bit different to most of the 6-parters. Same for Keys and Mariners. And Celestial Toymaker has stuff going on every episode, so keeps the viewer engaged. If there is anything I don't really like about the Massacre, it's that there is still lots of people shouting, and you can barely, a couple of people can barely get to say, when Stephen sees Gaston is so convinced he's a spy, even when Stephen's trying to tell him something, Gaston's like, "Get out!" and doesn't give him a chance. What a prick. But And there's also some dick characters. However, this could be necessary for the stories, so I won't hold the story against that. I also have to say Anne, I think she's more Irish than French. But I will say they are trying harder with their French accents in this story than the Reign of Terror. There's also Dodo at the end. She's got a very odd Cockney accent. I don't know if she retains this for the other stories, but she definitely has a very odd Cockney accent at the end of this one. To say, part 4, this story actually properly ends 15-ish minutes through part 4, and then the last 10 or so minutes, less than 10 minutes, are dedicated to the Doctor and Stephen's argument and Dodo coming onto the ship, and then Stephen coming back to alert the Doctor about the policeman, and then them taking Dodo with them. I'll get that back to that in a bit, but one thing I will say is both a good thing and a bad thing. I'll get to that in a bit, but story does do a pretty good job for the most part. So I think I actually found it pretty good. I didn't really enjoy it the first time round. I thought I would have given it a 6 out of 10, I think, back then. But on the rewatch, I actually had a pretty good time with it. I mean, I can't say it's perfect, but it's still pretty good. It's still pretty fun. I actually had more fun with this than Galaxy 4, which is one I really liked to start with. And The Mythmakers, which had been a bit more of an enjoyable story to begin with. The only one that seems to have stayed where it is so far this season is Mission to the Unknown. Even Dalek's Master Plan, which I already had as a 10 out of 10 to begin with, was even better on the rewatch. Mission to the Unknown was just stayed where it was. I didn't really have any much opinion change on that one. Even Feast of Stephen, I found it a bit more likeable on the rewatch. It was just that Master Plan, Mission to the Unknown, just stayed where it was. It just didn't really do anything. Whilst the other ones have either gone down or gone up, or just even better on the rewatch. And yeah, Massacre, it was just really good. And wow, that Massacre end scene, that lasts about a minute or so, I think, when people getting murdered. You don't see people physically getting murdered, but you get lots of drawings, like when the titles come up. And that's another thing. After the title sequences, we don't get a recap. We get to just go straight into the next bit. I think there's a couple of other stories that do this. I can't remember which ones exactly, but I think it's either during the John Pertwee or Tom Baker era that there's 1 or 2 stories that just do this. I think Genesis of the Daleks does this sometimes. I might be wrong. Episode 2, Genesis of the Daleks, episode 2, does this. I think the rest then have the recap, especially episode 3, where it recaps a lot from the previous episode. I think I just think there's maybe 1 or 2 other stories that might have gone straight in instead of having a recap. Day of the Daleks, I'll have to quickly mention here, has a bit of the theme tune of the start of the end theme tune when it's recapping the previous scene, and that's just very odd. I don't know, I think they might have taken it out for the special edition. I don't know, I'll have to check that one out again. But it'll definitely be the standard edition for the review. Might check out the special edition as well, just to be on the safe side. Rewatch special edition, of course, I mean. But certainly for the normal ones, they have the start of the theme at the during the recaps. And then with episode 2s, they then cut to black, and then we cut to the next scene. 3 and 4, the next scene starts immediately, as if it was just carrying on. But like I said, the theme tune makes a brief appearance at the start of episodes 2, 3, and 4 for some at the end of the recaps for some reason. Anyway, back to Massacre. The Massacre scenes are brutal to listen to. I mean, you don't really see them. If the actual episode had the pictures instead of the audio, but pictures as well, like the reconstruction, it's still exactly the same. It's brutal to listen to, but you just get pictures of death and murder. What's even more frightening is that the Doctor mentions it doesn't just last one day, it lasts weeks. And it spreads from Paris, and there are hundreds of innocent people murdered just for their religious beliefs. Remember, this is the 16th century, 15-something, 47, I think he said? No, Elizabeth wasn't on the throne by that point. 67, maybe? Date below, somewhere, insert here. It was definitely during Elizabeth I's reign in England. And, yeah, it just, that scene where we had lots of people being the murders happening, it was just brutal. It was horrible. If we seen this on screen, this would certainly not be suitable for children. It'd be something that would work with Torchwood, but not with Doctor Who. Not any point Doctor Who. Not, at least not on the scale that they mentioned. Maybe a little bit, but not too much. Heck, I don't even know if Torchwood would go that far. Even Death in Heaven. I think Death in Heaven is the most. Is the most nastiest Doctor Who story, just for the ideology. But in terms of violence, I'm not quite sure. But this one would probably be the number one if we actually saw it. As we've only got pictures, it's not too bad, but we still hear some really nasty audio, and I'm sure even the original audio with the episode would have been just as horrible to listen to. It is nasty. What I was mentioning about the Daleks Master Plan Part 12 being a pretty nasty end, well, same here. This one is a really nasty end. This is why, again, as I mentioned in Master Plan, this episode would get a 12 rated episode if it was up to me, because of the nasty, horrible ending, or at least halfway point of this episode. But brutal, horrible. So, yeah. They knew how to make nasty endings in this season. And this is the story that follows Dalek Master Plan, which had the most nastiest ending of Doctor Who at this point, only to be, I don't know if I could say topped, but certainly matched by this one. I mean, if we could actually see what was going on, maybe it would top it. But as we can't, it's just matched. In Master Plan, we could see what's going on, albeit as it's missing in telesnap reconstructions for the reconstruction. But in terms of, but we could definitely see it, well, with the reconstruction and the original episode itself. Here, it's just pictures, but if we could see the actual murders, definitely would top it. It is nasty. I will now talk about what follows. That is something a bit more humorous, really. Well, after an emotional argument between Stephen and the Doctor, and Stephen leaves and the Doctor ponders whether to go back to his own planet. Actually, that's a very good moment, because it shows Stephen's had enough. He's gone through quite a lot of this, and he's gone very upset about the Doctor just letting Anne die and just letting history take its course, and he's gone a bit upset about it. I mean, yeah, the Doctor doesn't want to interfere with history, but he has been a bit heartless about it, so you can understand where Stephen's coming from. However, Stephen comes back into the TARDIS when he notices the policeman heading this way to make sure that they don't find the Doctor. So he obviously stays as a companion until the Savages, of course. But certainly he almost left here, just like how Clara almost left in Kill the Moon, but came back for Mummy on the Orient Express. The same could be said for Last Christmas, but under different Death in Heaven and Death in Heaven and Last Christmas, but under different circumstances. But yeah, just it would have been a good ending if he had gone, though. But it would have had two characters end on bad terms. But I'm glad he came back. Seems one of my favourite companions. Also, it would have meant that the companions lineup wouldn't be as messed up as it was. Could have been. That being said, just having one companion would have, alongside the Doctor, probably would have been okay. But I think keeping Stephen with Dodo is probably the best move, at least until we got to the Savages. That being said, Dodo. This is where we get to the more comedic element of the final episode. So we had a kind of emotional bit with Stephen and the Doctor, and then the Doctor reflecting on his past companions, minus Catherine and Sarah, and then mentioning whether he should go back to his home planet, which, nice little nod to that. We haven't really mentioned it much since meeting the Doctor. We haven't really mentioned their home planet. We met the the meddling monk, but we haven't really met the planet. But he only briefly mentions whether he should go back. We don't really get much information until we get to the War Games at the very end of the 60s. So we got another 3.5 seasons till then. And Gallifrey, as I mentioned, doesn't get mentioned until start of season 11. And we do get to see bits of the planet. I'm not sure if the War Games it is Gallifrey, if they do go to that, but we definitely do see it in Colony in Space and the Three Doctors. We definitely go to it properly in The Deadly Assassin in season 14. Again, quite a while to get to that. And then we get Dodo's introduction. Like I said, I'm not sure what the voice is supposed to be. I think it's supposed to be Cockney. I think it's supposed to be Wimbledon Common, apparently. We are landed on, so I'm guessing that's where we are. So maybe not so much Cockney as more southwest London, I suppose, but still. Dodo isn't really that great of a character, let's be honest. We'll talk about her a bit more over the rest of the season, but she's not that great of a character. I am glad they've stuck with her for the rest of the season, but she's not the best character, and I don't think Jacqueline does as great of a performance. I think she is the weakest companion of the First Doctor, apart from Katarina, of course. One advantage of her is that she gets more than 5 episodes. She doesn't die at the end of the arc. She carries on till halfway through the War Machines and then just leaves. So, step up from Katarina. In fact, we're not going to see any other companions die until Earthshock. Yay! And her scene is a bit more comedic. She's trying to get help for a injured boy, but then she just gets caught up with inside the TARDIS, and then with the Doctor, and then returning Stephen, and then she just gets carried away, accidentally taken away on board, and she doesn't really care. She's fine with it, and yeah, that'll lead into the next story, the Ark. So, yeah, I can't say it's a bad ending, but it's not that great, especially after the emotional goodbye from Stephen and argument from with him and the Doctor, and the pretty brutal conclusion to the story. I will say, though, it does make sense in setting up the new companion. It does. All the Stephen and Doctor and Dodo in the TARDIS stuff does take about 10 minutes, or just under, to do. Maybe about 9 or just under. So the last 9 or 10 minutes of the episode is dedicated to all those bits, as opposed to part of the episode. That being said, that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It's not so great in terms of the story, but in terms of being a bit different to normal stories, where it would go on until about a couple minutes before the end, and then maybe preview the next story. It's actually pretty good. It actually makes this story slightly shorter than normal, and gives us enough time for what appears to be Stephen's goodbye, and then after the Doctor's reflection, Dodo enters, and then Stephen comes back, and they just carry on. So, yeah, he did get over it a bit quickly, though, I will say. He did get over it a bit quickly. But I will say, it's a decent ending, I'll say. It's not great, but it's good enough. It'll do. Maybe if it was less comedic with Dodo, it would have been better, because of the emotion with Stephen and the Doctor just after the events of the story. But it's still pretty decent. It's okay. And yeah, that's the Massacre. It is great. I actually really liked this one. It might take a few rewatches for people to get into it as much. I don't think this is a very popular one, as far as I'm aware. And if I was speaking from previous viewing point of view, I would probably agree, but now I can say it's definitely one of the better ones. It's one of the better historicals, alongside the Aztecs and the Crusade, and counting pseudo-historicals, the Time Meddler plus the Chase and the Daleks Master Plan, when they went back in time, Mary Celeste and the Egyptians scenes. I'll also throw in Marco Polo as well. That was a great story. There's not really... I think the only historicals I wasn't so keen on were the 2 Dennis Spooner ones. He got better for his pseudo-historicals, and with the time measure and the historical stuff in Master Plan, but his pure historicals were just poor. The other historicals have been good to great, and this one is definitely a great one. In terms of future historicals, we've got the Gunfighters, which is not that great. The Smugglers, which is even worse, in my opinion. It might differ on the rewatches. The Highlanders, which is alright, I suppose. I can just about follow it. And Black Orchid, which is great. And then there's plenty of pseudo-historicals in the future. I think Evil of the Daleks is the next one, with the Daleks in the Victorian era, and then Abominable Snowman with the Yetis, and so forth from there. I think that's just that. I think it's those. I don't think there's any other pseudo historicals before those. Before those two. No. Proper historicals, or just plain sci-fi, or in the case of War Machine's conventional present day Earth with some slight sci-fi elements, but also science fact. So anyway, that's it from The Massacre. I'm going to give this story a 8 out of 10. I might be being a bit generous, especially as I gave The Crusade a 7, I think? I gave it a 7? Yeah, I think so. Or it might have gotten an 8, actually. It was either a 7 or an 8. If it was a 7, then I'm being pretty generous to this story. If it was an 8, then, okay, it's on the same lines. If I'll put down what I gave it. So here's what I gave The Crusade. So yeah, you can tell whether I was either being too generous on this story, being a bit more generous on this story, or if they're about the same level on terms of a score level. I would probably say this is slightly better. If I was to rank the historical stories at this point in time, well, the Aztecs would be, this is excluding the time measures, that's pseudo, and this would be the same for Chase and Master Plan. It would definitely be the Aztecs, I think maybe Marco Polo for a better story. Then we get the Massacre, Crusade, Reign of Terror, Romans. So yeah, I would probably say Marco Polo's just slightly better in terms of a story. I think even though that does take its time with actually telling the story, as opposed to this one, which actually is more of a 3.5 part story. Take out some elements and remove the ending, and you could squeeze it down to 3 parts. Really, I think it works fine at 4 parts, considering what it's got to do at the very end. But if it was going to be a conventional story, you could take out some bits and shorten the the ending to just Stephen almost deciding to leave, and then Dodo coming in, and then they just decide to go 3 minutes tops, as opposed to 10. But like I said, that's if they were trying to get it down to 3 episodes as opposed to 4. Which may have been fine. They could have taken out some of the lesser needed elements in the first episode, to be honest, as usually the most insignificant stuff is in the first episodes for these stories. Or in Master Plan's case, 7th. Oh, Feast of Stephen, I keep digging on you. I'm not sorry, though. I'm not sorry. So that's it from my review of The Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve. Fun fact, the massacre actually took place on St. Bartholomew's Day. So I don't know why they just couldn't call it the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's, or the St. Bartholomew's Massacre, or the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Day. Although most of the events are within the couple of days leading up to the event, and by the looks of it, this took place in the very early morning. I don't know, maybe they just should have called it just The Massacre. Or Eve of the Massacre, I suppose. Maybe. But anyway, that's my review of this story. Tune in next time where I review The Ark, which, pre-rewatch thoughts, is my least favourite story of this season. So I'm not that excited for rewatching this story again. I think I've seen it twice at least. I've certainly seen it at least once. Probably seen it twice for some reason. And not for the rewatches for these reviews. That's to go. Have to do that. But I'm not that looking forward to it. I'm more looking forward to the story afterwards, the Celestial Toymaker, which is another one of my favourites of this season. Gunfighters is, I would say, is also another one I'm not that looking forward to. The Savages, I'm kind of in the between. I think it's good, but I'm not that excited for it. And the War Machines is a pretty good story. So I'll be looking forward to that. Hi guys, Nick here. My camera stopped recording during my pre-rewatch expectations, which stories I was looking forward to of the rest of the Hartnell era coming up. Just as I was talking about Daleks' invasion of 2150 AD, which I know is not a Hartnell story, it's a film, but I was going to do that one as well after season 3. And then whilst I was talking about the 10th planet, it bleeped and I caught wind, but it was only during editing that I knew it was even worse, that it just stopped recording when I got to Daleks' Invasion Earth, or coming to the end of it anyway, instead of midway through the 10th planet. So, quick roundup for those last 3. Daleks' Invasion of Earth, sorry, the Daleks' Invasion of 2150 AD, I am very looking forward to seeing that. The Smugglers, I am not looking forward to seeing that, and the 10th planet, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Part 4 is the best episode, and not just because of the regeneration, but due to, it's just better overall than the other 3 episodes, and it's such a shame it's missing, especially due to the regeneration, which is the cherry on the top of much nicer episodes than the other 3. But I do like the 10th planet, so I think it's a good story. I don't love it, but I do like it, and I think it's good. So I'm looking forward to that more than the Smugglers, and as more than the Ark, the Gunfighters, and maybe on the same level as Savages, maybe slightly more. I'm not sure. Savages I thought was good, but not that great, as I mentioned. But I'm more looking forward to Celestial Toymaker and the War Machines, and of course Daleks' Invasion of 2150 AD. Okay, back to me to round out this review. Anyway, so that's it from me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. Stay put. Excuse me. So yeah, it has a slight of a... Okay, anyway. What's more is that... Excuse me. Excuse me. Anyway, so that's my review of the Massacre, aka the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve. Tune in next time where I review... Gotta go and get the DVD now, so I'm gonna have to stop this recording and flash the DVD. I might even have to recap that line. So that's it from my review of the Massacre of the... But yeah, that's my review of the Massacre of St. Bartholomew. But anyway, that's my review of the Massacre of... But anyway, that's my review of this story. Tune in next time where I'll be... So, and of course I'm very excited to be rewatching Daleks' Invasion Earth. But the regeneration is the cherry on the cake. So, anyway... But the regeneration would be the cherry on the cake.